All right. We'll go and get started. We'll introduce ourselves. My name is Dink and this is my bride now. We got married 3 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
And when we were originally asked to speak, we were single. But we are part of the Temecula Valley Church, which is in Southern California. As you can see on the bottom right of our screens there, we are part of its wine country. It's about 60 miles northeast of San Diego and about 90 miles southeast of LA. So we are in Riverside County. I was part of the LA church for since 1997 and moved out here to get married in December. And Neveen was a single mom with two beautiful daughters, Jasmine and Amani. We also have an extra family member living with us as well.
My daddy.
Yeah, her dad, Mac.
Yeah.
We are, just so you guys know a little bit about us, I am from originally a Jewish background. Neveen was born in Cairo, Egypt. And so we try to bring Middle East peace together on most days. Some days we're making it worse, but we're trying to bring it together more. Neveen is currently gone back to college as well, in addition to being the caregiver for her dad. I have the privilege of working for Netflix. So we've actually been quite busy during the recent things going on in the world, and also attended University of Oklahoma. And Neveen is an expert marketplace shopper. I think that's one of her big skills too on Facebook. But why don't you go ahead and introduce a little bit more about our background, how long you were single, when you were baptized, all that stuff.
All right. So I'm 41 now. A week ago turned 41. I got baptized when I was 19 years old in the campus ministry in Riverside, California. It was Hoffman ministry, and I had so much zeal, no knowledge behind it, but I was in love with God. I learned to really go after Him at that time. So, yeah, I was not a single mom at the time, and I'll tell you a little more as time goes on. We'll just keep it going.
And for myself, I was baptized in '97 in Irvine, California, part of the Orange County region of the LA Church, and then have been in the LA Church during all of that time. Obviously, I had my own ups and downs. I think out of those 20-some years, I was spiritual, at least a couple of them. But for all of it, I've had a chance to lead the singles of the West Side Church for a while, and I'm involved now currently in the Screenland Ministry, which is an arts media ministry in LA, where we're actually establishing a production company to do things for within Hollywood as well for the church. So it's been a lot of fun doing that as well on the side. But I myself was single for a very long time. I think one of the biggest areas and challenges for me was at one point I was supposed to move to Israel, to Jerusalem a few years ago, right before I met Neveen actually, and was supposed to help replant the church in Jerusalem, and unfortunately had my citizenship revoked when they flagged me as a potential missionary. But God has been great rebuilding my life since then, obviously, present company included. And the other thing you'll notice is our height difference. If you see the pictures, I am 6'1" and Neveen is 4'8.5". So we're quite there. For us, though, to jump into the class and kind of get it as everyone jumps in, we're great to have everyone there. And as you guys continue to come in, please feel free to put where you are. And if you guys want to see the presentation larger, again, for those of you just joining, just double click on the window where the presentation is, and it'll make it a little bit larger on your screen. And if you're trying to log in as well, we can only let so many people on screen at a time. I'm gonna add a few more. We'll keep trying to do it.
Okay.
But the biggest question for us is what gets you stuck? I think being single, being married, no matter where you're at, life can get us stuck. We all come into the church, we come to our relationship with God with a lot of hope, a lot of excitement, a lot of fervor, a lot of passion, a lot of humility. And all of those things get attacked, especially for me, my humility over time. And some of the things that can get you stuck can be hopelessness, tragedy of pandemic that's going on, disappointment, illness. One that I often see in the singles ministry and would hear quite a bit from sisters was the brothers be tripping. So the opposite sex can make us struggle quite a bit. The desire for physical intimacy, being single for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, having dated, not dated. There's all these different challenges to life that can be there. There are times when we're honest with our church, or even our attitude or views of church leadership have affected and can cause us to get stuck. Anxiety and emotional stress obviously are big factors. Ultimately, just anything that does not draw us closer to God can cause us to get stuck. And Neveen, why don't you go ahead and share what one thing that gets you stuck?
Anxiety, for sure. I am a doer by nature. If I'm feeling lonely, I will find people to make friends with. If I'm hungry and I don't want to eat alone, I'll find you. I'll talk to strangers on the street. I have no problem making friends. But with the pandemic and being stir crazy, I started to begin to build anxiety, not knowing if I was going to get to go back to work. My father was in a nursing home at the time. A week later, after they put him on lockdown, he gets COVID-19. And there's nothing I can do except pray. But it didn't feel like the prayers were breaking through the physical condition I couldn't control, which was anxiety. So it really did give me a sense of, what do I got to do to get unstuck? And so it was on my hands and knees. It was calling out people. It was, I needed to see faces. I didn't just need to hear your voice. I started FaceTiming anyone and everyone. And that helped me in the process of getting unstuck, and then just letting them know where my struggle was, and then telling them, hold me accountable. Pray with me, pray for me, ask me how I did on my prayer. How long did I pray? And, my kids are 14 and 12, and they're very independent. Like, they could be in their room all day. They got Netflix, they got the whole works. And I was just like, come hang out with mama. And it was definitely, I had to say, that was something I had to really fight through to get unstuck.
And I think for me, a big one is hope deferred. And one of the biggest challenges in life, no matter what stage of life you're in, is when you have hope deferred. For me, we all know the scripture in Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope in a future. But oftentimes we can sit there and when we're first baptized, that scripture screams at us and we're like, oh, awesome. God's got a plan. My life has been hard and now it's about to get better. And it does. But then as we go on, we can have challenges with work, family, dating, no matter what it is. And we start to wonder, where has that gone? There are things that when that hope that we first had when we got baptized gets challenged, it's easy to get stuck. And I think for me, when I got my citizenship revoked from Israel and was not able to move back there and help replant the church in Jerusalem, that really hit me a lot. That was like a big kick in the gut, and it was hard. Thinking, single man, I sold everything I had, I quit my job, I'd gotten a roommate, another brother was moving into my apartment to take my spot, and then all of a sudden, everything I owned fit on a small table. It was the old one suitcase challenge kind of mindset. And all of a sudden you get that call from Israel going, you know what, you're not the right kind of Jew, we don't want you here. And we're going to revoke your citizenship. And that was hard to hear. And so that hope deferred of thinking of, I love Israel, I love Jerusalem, I love how beautiful the Middle East is. And that was very difficult for me to not be able to do it. And so this scripture started to be challenged for me. And we can even do that looking at today in the world today. And all the times we're hearing, never before in history, the pandemic, war, rumors of war, the civil unrest, racial divide, financial uncertainty, political manipulation. No matter what country you're in, no matter what part of the world you live in, these are all common themes that we're hearing today. You can hear them in every region of the world. And you can start to ask the question, where is Jeremiah 29:11? Where is my hope? Where is my celebration? And so for me, that could become a very difficult thing when I get to where I can start to get stuck in my relationship with God. Sure.
So there was a study I did not too long ago, and it really blew me away, because too often we think we're imperfect. We are not, even close to what God would have as good, but he loves us so much. And how the scripture talks about God has a perfect plan. And we look at ourselves, well, how can God give us, perfection when we're so imperfect? He's perfect. His plan is perfect for our lives. So no matter how imperfect we are, we don't stand before what God has in store for us. So always remember, God has a perfect plan for us. So that should give us so much hope to get unstuck, to start realizing I'm not in control here. It's all about Jesus.
Yeah, and as a note, I did notice it in the chat. If you're on screen, if you can make sure your mics are muted, just so that way we can avoid any echo or playback. Thank you very much for that note in the chat. But as we go through that, we can sit there and look at a time like this, and we can challenge that stuff and figure out no one's been through all this stuff. Look at all these things stacked against us. But in Jesus's time alone, there was a similar time. In Jesus's time, 9 out of 10 Jews lived at or below the poverty line. Romans believed that inequality was a natural and inevitable state of life. Therefore, why not oppress people? Because it's going to happen. It's oppress or be oppressed. And that was their mindset. So that's how they ruled the Roman Empire in the time of Jesus. As far as disease, syphilis, malaria, tuberculosis, parasites, leprosy, on and on and on, were extremely common in that region of the world. There was huge political infighting. We see in the U.S., you see it between Republicans and Democrats, and Donald Trump versus the rest of the world. You can have all these different challenges, and there's similar conflicts in several parts of the world, in the Middle East, in Africa, in Europe, in Asia. There's no part of the world that isn't touched by the same political infighting. But also in Jesus's day, the Sadducees and Pharisees had massive fights going on. It was a huge divide. The Sadducees had bought the temple, control of the temple. They made friends with the Romans. They were the 1%ers of the community. They were that elite, and fought with the Pharisees quite a bit. So much so that a little known fact, the Sadducees actually held the entire trial of Jesus and got him convicted of crucifixion without the Pharisees even being present. Jews were in a constant state of war and rebellion against Rome. Protests, violent attacks. They started several failed revolutions and civil wars, and kept going. So again, Jesus, when we look to the scriptures, the Bible can relate to our time in more ways than we even know how. Yeah. So the first step, if we've got all of these things going on and you've got all of these challenges, all right, we've talked enough about what the problems are, with no matter what it is. I think one of the biggest challenges is just not to give up. I think when you've been a disciple for that first 6 months, a year, there can be challenges. But we're fired up, we're excited. It's almost a badge of honor to be persecuted when you're first baptized. And then that can get wear on you over time. And you can start to get stuck, or the flatness of life, or you just whatever the reason is. You know your reason. In fact, I'd love for people to share what gets them stuck in the chat. What are those situations that get you stuck? And here in Hebrews 12, the scripture says, "So then let us rid ourselves of everything that gets in the way of sin, which holds on to us so tightly. And let us run with determination the race that lies before us. Let us keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, and whom our faith depends from beginning to end." And it's a challenge. It's just sometimes all you need to do to get unstuck is not give up. Not give up. I once heard the actor Jeff Goldblum talk about how he got ahead in life. He was a waiter for 20, 30 years before he ever got his first breakthrough in the movie The Fly. And he said they had heard a quote from another previous actor from another generation that said the last one to give up is the one that's going to get the part. So 20 years he was a waiter and a jazz musician on the side. And he just never gave up, and he refused to give up. And sometimes that's what we have to do in our own life. And it can be hard. Neveen, single for 20 years. Myself was single for 20 years. The church at the time we got married, in the singles ministry a very long time. And that could be a challenge. Sometimes you could go through breakups, divorce. Some folks are widowed. Some folks have never dated. We're all over the place. in what we go through. But I think the scripture really tells us and wants us to remember just not to give up. And I know that that can seem contrite and a simple answer. That might be right there with just go pray about it, have faith, and while these things are all true, sometimes we want more than that. We want that magic bullet that's going to get us unstuck. But I do not undervalue the ability of just not giving up on your dreams, not giving up on your hopes, not giving up on God, not giving up on unanswered prayer, not giving up on all these different things. We can feel, I see someone wrote in there, not feeling good enough. Mm-hmm. That is a huge one. And if you do not give up, that's where it starts. It's not where it's going to end. But the first step for me is always just not giving up. I refuse to ever give up. So the next area I think is about, the question is, when we all got baptized, we all trusted God, but I think there's a very real question. Do you still trust God?
I got to share with you guys, I wasn't single for the last 21 years of being a disciple. At 2 years after becoming a disciple, I just felt controlled. I came from a very abusive upbringing in the Middle East, and then it came into the States with us, and my father was bipolar, and my father beat my mother, who my mother beat us, my father beat us, I got beat up by my brothers. I was just a punching bag. And so coming into the kingdom, I finally felt like God gave me the new family I asked for. But if you guys recall, back in the day, it was don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, don't go there, don't do this. I was just like, no more control. And I just felt like remembering the only thing that might give me some freedom, because I wanted love. I wanted to be loved. So I was like, I'm going to get married. So crazy me meets a guy at work. And 3 months later, I elope, and overnight I get married in Vegas. Mind you, I call myself a disciple. I am scared out of my mind. I come back home. It literally wears off over 24 hours. And I go to the ministers and I was like, make right of my sin. What have I done? This guy won't leave me alone. Like, I didn't even know what to do. I didn't even know what annulment was. I was so naive. But I realized I knew God had something for me, and I was making a mess of my life, and I needed his help. Well, God helped me for 10 years. That's where my children are from. It's from my ex-husband and I. And I fought so hard, and we both fought to try and to work it out. And, it didn't at the end, but I felt like I was always trying to fall forward. I wasn't going to give up, because I remember the foundation. It was, I finally found Jesus and he found me. He knew where I was and he was going to love me anyway. Mind you, I didn't start getting the help I needed to deal with all of my aftermath of my life and my upbringing until about 10 years into that marriage. Then I started realizing I'm not alone, and I'm hurting and I'm suffering. And although I have the gift of salvation, I don't know how to accept it. I don't know how to love myself, accept myself, feel good enough. Talk about not feeling good enough. I was a hot mess with that. I was getting beat every day of my life growing up. So what made me think I was, if my own family made me feel like I was worthless and I was worth being beat every day, what made me think that the kingdom would give me the love I needed? There was always a lacking for me.
And those are where your trust can get challenged. So you end up having all these different things in our past before God, and even our history with God and his people can be challenging. Life is difficult. And Neveen had been through a lot of challenges. And when she grew up in Egypt, she went through a lot of very difficult cultural things. She went through a lot of practices that are considered very barbaric by today's society, but went through them herself. And anyone familiar with that part of the world knows what those are, knows what have done to many women to curb their sex drive. Mm-hmm. And so then you have that trust broken from your family, you have that trust broken from those things, and then you come into the church and we bring that baggage with us. You come to God and you bring that baggage there, but then you get that trust constantly gets challenged. Am I going to truly trust God? If I'm not going to give up, can I still trust what it is? And Isaiah 30:20-21, I think says it well. The Lord will give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction, but your teacher will no longer hide himself. With your own eyes you will see him, and whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear this command behind you. This is the way. walk in it. God will guide you. He will pull you out. And even through the mistakes that she made, the mistakes that I've made, the mistakes that we all can make, God will pull you from that thing and guide you and help you get unstuck. So I think once we're willing to just not give up, no matter how big a mess we're in. And then once you're that, can I trust God? Do I still trust God? Do I pull back? Do I stop sharing my faith? Do I stop going on dates? I think it's one of the biggest things singles can struggle with. Not the only thing, but one of the big challenges can be when you have the hope deferred, or you lose that, you stop trusting God with dating. You stop trusting God with the brothers or the sisters. You stop trusting God with your job, your career. You stop trusting God with your physical family. You stop trusting God with your finances. And we have to keep pushing through.
Absolutely.
I think once we do that, there are some positives that happen. Once you recognize, I just can't give up. I need to trust God no matter how much I may or may not want to and how much my life may show it. It's time to start celebrating the good in our lives. If you've been a single saved person for anything like that, I would love to hear how long people have been disciples. How long have you been in the singles? I'd love to hear people chat that in there, in the chat. Just start typing how long they've been around. 26 years for Joey Blaze. I mean, 30 years. Awesome.
10 years, 9 years, 10 years.
That's awesome. Seeing everyone and how long you've been a disciple, that is something we're celebrating. That is something that is great and should not be undersold. So when you are stuck, there's a reason the scriptures say, remember the joy of your salvation, because you start to lose it. We normalize. We as humans have an amazing capacity to adapt to our circumstances, both good and bad.
Absolutely.
And when you do that, you can forget. And as Christians, I think oftentimes we focus on when you're stuck or you're in sin or you're struggling or something's going on. What do you need to? You got to pray. You got to fast. You got to beat your chest. You got to confess. You got to get after it. But the Bible actually only commands. If you read the Old Testament, there's only one command to fast. There are dozens of commands to feast. How often do you feast in your current life? How often do you celebrate and rejoice and celebrate? And Queen Esther, and the story in the book of Esther, Queen Esther called those group of people to fast before she revealed herself to the king and to ruin Haman's plot. And when she revealed herself before that, what she asked the people to do was fast for 3 days. But when God answered, they celebrated for 180 days.
What kind of party?
Exactly. Do you celebrate that time? And Holly, I do see your question, and we will address that in a little bit. I will address that one specifically. I think that's a great question. But when we do it, we got to sit there to celebrate life. You got to feast. Find reasons to feast. The fact that you are saved another day is a reason to have a dinner with friends. The fact that you are here in this room, in this virtual conference, celebrate that life. Find a reason to celebrate. We love Christmas. We love the holidays. We love, in America, we love 4th of July. We love a lot of different things. But time to celebrate. I think another thing with celebrating your life is you have to be intentional with it. And when you are intentional, intentionality helps. When you're stuck and in a rut, a lot of times what I notice for me is that I'm adapting to a situation. That's some of the things that come off on mute by accident. It's on the screen. Thank you. And if you're challenged to look for that good and to be intentional, you'll find it. It's everywhere around you. It's everywhere around you. And there are times when I sat there, when I was rejected by Israel, I had lost my job. I sold everything I owned. I had gotten rid of I didn't have a car. Someone else had moved into my apartment, my room in the apartment with brothers, and I knew nowhere I was going. So literally, I was spending my money on lawyers and other things to try to fight it and combat it. At that time, I was also challenged not to attend services for a while because my case was going to the Israeli Supreme Court. And there was a strategy to try to focus on it. And it was all these different debates and should you do it? Should you not do it? What's going on? And it was just hard. And I had to be intentional to find the good in life. And now I have a lot of great things going on that I love in life. And there are a lot of challenges as well. But I am no happier now than I was at that time because I found the things in life to celebrate. I chose to push through. I chose not to give up on my dreams, on my hopes, on the aspirations that God had given me. And so when we listen, when we're content, when we feast and fast, and I think what helped me is there's a concept called Dayenu. And Dayenu in Hebrew means it would have been enough. And it's usually done around Easter, the Passover time, the celebration of the book of Exodus. And what that concept is, literally, the phraseology with it kind of goes, if God would have given the Egyptians the plague but did not spare us from them, it would have been enough. If he gave us the plagues but did not deliver us from the Egyptians, it would have been enough. If he delivered us from the Egyptians but did not part the Red Sea, it would have been enough. If he parted the Red Sea but did not drown our enemies in the Red Sea, it would have been enough. If he'd have drowned our enemies in the Red Sea but did not give us the promised land, it would have been enough. If he gave me the promised land but did not give us his Messiah, it would have been enough. If he gave us his Messiah but did not have him die on the cross, it would have been enough. If he died on the cross but did not raise on the third day, it would have been enough. If he raised on the third day but did not give me the spouse I wanted, it would have been enough. If he gave me the spouse I wanted but did not give me the job I wanted, it would have been enough. And you can see how we could go on and on and on and on and on. We have to remember how many blessings we take for granted. We have to remember how many things in our life that are just so incredible. It's really important that we do that as we continue through our relationship with God.
I'd like to share about this part. Two things. I'm a very practical person. Anyone that knows me, I'm like, give me the details. I need the details. It helps me figure out what's going on in my little brain. When I get stuck, some fundamental things that I can do that can help me is I'll read a psalm and I might not know what I want to pray and I might not know exactly how to formulate my feelings, my emotions. I'm a very emotional kind of girl. I just read a little verse and I write it out. What is it about it that is God talking to me? And what is it? How can I rewrite my own psalm? And I just start taking a psalm and rewriting it. And before I know it, I'm in 2 pages, 3 pages of my journal. And I didn't even know what I really wanted to pray for, but they stimulate me. They bring me to a place of thought and provoke my feelings to come out. And I loved it. And I feel that really helps me get unstuck. And if I asked you what you ate last week, would you remember per se? Like I ate this or that. Maybe if it was a fancy meal or you went out with some friends, maybe you'll remember the details of that. But do you remember everything you ate, what you ate last week, the week before, or so forth? So same thing, I heard it before said, you know, ministers and people sit for a very long time to make all these, sermons out. And sometimes we don't remember. But it was a meal that fed us at that time. It was a meal that fed us at that time. And we have to think of our quiet time. Just because we don't really dig in and bite down and don't understand everything we're learning in that moment, it doesn't mean that meal didn't get you to the afternoon, or to the evening, or to tomorrow, or to next week. So don't underestimate the value of your time with God, your prayers with God, your connection with God. So those are just 2 fundamental things that I really held on to that helped me a lot.
Thank you. Let me pull that up. And then there's also this quote, and we'll be a little shorter on this point, but am I more known or less known today than yesterday? I think this is an important concept. The idea of being known and being deliberately known is incredibly challenging. And there's a great quote by the modern theologian Timothy Keller that says, "To be loved but not known is comforting but superficial. To be known and not loved is our greatest fear. But to be fully known and truly loved is, well, a lot like being loved by God. It is what we need more than anything. It liberates us from pretense, humbles us out of our self-righteousness, and fortifies us for any difficulty life can throw at us." And this is, I think, that Neveen's a tremendous example in for me. And I'd love for her just to share about some of the things that she does to be more known, especially in times when she's stuck.
So when I returned back to God after making a mess of my life, because I fell away, you guys, and then came back to God. And in that time, Temecula Valley has what I call an oasis ministry, sisters that are 60 and 70, 5 or 6 of them. And here at the time, I was like 35, and I'm the youngest, trying to kind of navigate hanging out with people and fellowshipping. And I even bought an SUV so I can take them places with me. And they're like, no, we don't want to go. It's 8 o'clock. We have our bedtime. I was like dealing with that kind of stuff. So I was like, Jesus, help me here. So I decided to find one other sister who's probably around 50. And she was like, I'll go with you places. I'll do things with you. And we made a decision in a pact. We were going to go to every single event, whether it was Irvine for one night or San Francisco for 2 nights. Mind you, I don't drive more than 30 minutes or an hour or 2. And I'm like, somebody else drive. I always like to feel protected and secured in that way. So I was like, let's go. I booked a hotel room. I didn't even have any extra roommates besides me and the sister, but lo and behold, God gave us 2 more roommates from San Diego. We just had fun. We just fellowship. We got to know people. Well, one of those events I got to go to was the Catalyst Conference. And I wanted to go to the Morning Time, Quiet Time series, and lo and behold, who is teaching that series? It's Mr. Dink himself. And first night, I listened to everything he had to say, and the first morning, and I thought that was really good stuff. I really like it. And he taught about Ruth. And then the next day I went, and I really enjoyed it again. And I know this isn't the dating, class, but I just remember saying, I got to meet this person. He's from Israel. He's saying a lot of words that are Arabic. I know a lot about, obviously, my Arabic heritage. And I jumped on a planner and said, I'd like to know you. And he looked at me and he was like, that would be nice. I said, I jumped off and I said, is this going to be a problem? Because he's almost 2 feet taller than me. And he goes, not at all. And from that point on, we started building a friendship. It took 2 years for us to get to the point where we are today. We broke off our dating relationship, got back on our path. We postponed our wedding. I mean, mind you, some stuff that was like really hard to deal with, but we pushed through and we dealt with it. But in the heart of my desire was, I want to be known by God, by his people, make friends, fellowship, let people know my story, because it's for such a time as this, your story can impact someone else. So don't think because you've been through some struggles that, what do you got to share? Your story is powerful. You have something to give somebody. Show it, share it, give it, because you know what? It'll encourage your spirit when you've encouraged others through even your work. Imagine I'm turning other people around as well.
So ultimately, then I think the question becomes why. We have to answer the why. We can have all these techniques trying to get unstuck. Why? What is the purpose? What is the point of getting unstuck? I think for you, you've got to find your reasons. And sometimes those reasons change depending on what you're stuck with. But these are some that Neveen and I came up with that influence us, whether it's heaven. We don't talk or think about heaven enough, and it's part of my why. I desire to go to heaven. I persevere. I don't give up. I can praise God. I celebrate heaven to come. All these different things, and we try to focus on that. Faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these 3 things remain, and the greatest is love. And for me, faith, hope, and love are kind of like a tripod. They build upon each other. If you start to remove one, the other 2 fall. And you've got to build all 3 up. And you got to continue to protect them. Living in grace, the fact that we don't have to do it alone, that we can seek others, that we can be known. Our spiritual families, hope for our physical family. If you're a single parent, your children, for your siblings, your parents, whatever it is, life can change in the blink of an eye. So it can go south, but it can also go north. It can get better. You can get stuck and unstuck in a moment's notice.
Absolutely.
You can be stuck. We talk about, when I mentioned Jeff Goldblum, the actor, earlier, he's one of those that they refer to as an overnight success, 20 years in the making. Mm-hmm. And we can sometimes feel like, wow, that person got this, they got that. they got married, they got that job, but we've got to focus on that struggle. We've got to focus on what it takes to get there. And ultimately, it's all a gift from God. And all of it is really important. My computer wants to make sure my eyes don't get tired. But gotta love my work stuff. It is. And for me, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I mean, I was just, my citizenship from Israel was just rejected a few years ago. And I went from having no job, having to start over in my career. The first job I took was was serving frozen yogurt to people for $12 an hour US. And, and that was starting over in Los Angeles is very expensive. That was very difficult to survive. And, but within a couple of years, God gave me one of the jobs of my dream. And the fact that I work for a company like Netflix is me, and the fact that I get to help with build sound stages and movie studios all over the world for Netflix. And, and that is a blessing in itself. But none of that, I am no happier, I am no less, or I'm no more unstuck based on those circumstances, though. None of that matters. And what matters is, am I striving towards God? Am I striving towards heaven? And I'd love to hear from you guys. What is your why? As you guys write it in the chat, I would love to see that. And then as well, I think we have about 10 minutes, and we'd love to open it up for any questions.